Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. We're pretty global today, coming from the fairly great looking scene of Ludlow Racecourse, where I'll be presenting for Racing TV a little later on. Ross is safely in his front chateau, hopefully enjoying a bit of sunshine. It still feels like the winter, even though we're on the last day of February. And TC's in his favourite Riyadh, and I think probably delighted to be back in Saudi after what was a really enjoyable weekend last weekend. Remake, the horse that you put up with so much confidence, won in Saudi at 2-1, and Diligent Harry, obviously over at Southwell, but part of an excellent, phenomenal weekend for Mick Appleby, that nap at 9-4 at TC. What's it like being back? Is it still a bit of a buzz in Riyadh after a sensational Saudi Cup?
I wish I could say yeah, but the answer is no. If you can tell behind, there's about 0 people here right now, and we're only an hour away from the first race. So it's a bit quiet. The buzz is definitely gone, albeit there are the architecture. The architecture's still here for the Saudi Cup with some advertising. So look, we're not going to be watching Saudi Cup kind of races this weekend, which I'll be covering here. But at the same time, it's still good fun. And the plus side, Jess, is that the weather is always good.
No international racing really to focus on this weekend. We've got some very good national hunt action. We are creeping close to the Cheltenham Festival, but we've got a lot of prize money on offer for some significant races this weekend. And we're going to focus on the Greatwood Chase. And in keeping with what we did last weekend, which worked out very nicely, we've got some winning selections in our YouTube comments for the big feature race at Kempton last weekend. That was won by the Anthony Honeyball team. And he could be back for more this week, over the course of this weekend. But the Greatwood Chase at Newbury, we have the exciting competition we did last weekend. It is back. We have 5 £20 free bets to give away. So either tweet SBK or comment underneath this podcast on YouTube with your selection of the Greatwood Chase. And the first 5 correct selections will get a free £20 bet. Terms and conditions are in the description. So you might already have your thought in mind, or you might be following suit with what we have on offer for you. So the Greatwood Chase, I was a bit disappointed. I'm not sure about the others on the pod with the numbers that have ended up in this field, because we do have a lot of money on offer. There's 100,000, and it's a smaller field than I was expecting. There was 18 at declaration at the entry stage, and there are 9 runners at declaration. So obviously there's plenty coming up, but still plenty of good prize money. Now we've got Grandeur Dam likely to go off one of the market leaders. He unseated when last seen at the first at Cheltenham on trials day. We've got the Kandoo Kid, bit of just a second type of horse for me with Kandoo Kid. It seems to like to finish second more than he can first, unlike High Skates Player, who's behind, who's got a lot of ones to his name. As I said, the field isn't deep. And Tom, I suppose this is indicative of Cheltenham coming up. How do you read it as a race?
Yeah, the last 2 weeks and the upcoming 2 weeks are always pretty below par in terms of quality and quantity of jumps horses. So I would say play all the races this weekend wisely, small stakes, and save up for Cheltenham if Cheltenham is your thing. If not, then play as you do. As you said, when I looked at this race on Tuesday, there were 18 runners in entries, and it actually looked like quite a good competitive heat. Look, the protagonists are still in the field, the likes of Grandeur Dam, Kandoo Kid, etc., that you've listed. But now we've got a smaller field. It's just less interesting. And actually, at the entry stage, I didn't even love the race then. So now I definitely don't love it. I spent a good hour on Tuesday going through the horses, past performances, replays. Nothing really stood out. I really thought this was a race that I'm definitely going to be leaving. However, for podcast purposes, I will put up a selection, and that selection is going to be Kandoo Kid. There is no wise or smart angle here, aside from the fact that this horse has course and distance form, jumps much better at Newbury, quite clearly didn't stay last time, now returns back to what I consider to be his favourite track. For a trainer, Paul Nicholls, who is flying right now and has won this race 3 times in the last 7 years. So there's the angle for Kandoo Kid, but being honest, I definitely won't be having a bet in the race.
He's also got PU next to his name. I know you don't like letters, but what did you make of that performance last time? They didn't have much explanation for it. It was just a non-event.
Yeah, I just don't think he stayed. He actually travelled really well into the race, going, that dodgy fence around Doncaster, going around the turn as they're about to come in. At that point of the race, he was travelling as well as anything, albeit he was off the speed, and it was a race dominated by those forwardly placed. It was just after that fence, he made a little bit of an error at the fence. Harry then started to niggle away, and there was no response. It was either he was flat or he didn't stay. I think it was a bit of both, personally. I don't think he wants any part of 3 miles. So the cut back to 2.5, I think we'll see this horse better, in better light. And I know you said I don't like figures next to their name. It's very true. However, a P, in my opinion, is better than an F or a U, or an R, in fact. So I'm willing to put a line through that. One horse can have one bad performance and bounce back.
Okay, so a P and a U together is fine, but a U and an R and an F and an RR, absolutely no. We could go on for days. Okay, TC, thanks for that. For me, the Kandoo Kid, I can't have him. I think he's a horse that just doesn't have the competitiveness in him for it to land a race of this nature, of this kind of quality. So I'm going to be taking you on. I'd like to go to see what Ross thinks of it next instead, because I think that you can pick holes in a lot of them. You know, the top two in the betting both have letters to their name for whatever reason. A UR is probably less in TC's mind than a PU, and that's what Grandeur Dam has. But if you go back to a form earlier on in the season, he was running some pretty good quality races, and Alan King has got his horses in much better form than maybe he had earlier on in the year, and he does have a bad racing rate, so I think he probably could be the right favourite, albeit it might not be like this come Saturday.
Yeah, I looked at him and I was pretty concerned about his overall profile. He's climbing the weights. I think the races he won, I'm not sure they're worth an awful lot. For me, it was Kandoo Kid. I think you're being quite tough on him, Jess. Like, if you watch his run back at Ascot behind JLo, he certainly made up a lot of ground from 2 out to 1 out and 1 out to the line. Doesn't look to me like a horse that doesn't want to go through with it. I'm with TC, but I'm also slightly against TC. I just think he ran poorly last time, and I don't think it was that he didn't stay, because he went from going really well to not going at all. I wonder whether you may be a bit right, just need perhaps a little bit soft in the slightly bigger field, and he had to do an awful lot of work to get through from quite far back to then get into a challenging position, whether he used up a bit of petrol. I could certainly give him another chance. I like the return to Newbury. You know, this long track, home straight, clearly suits him. Better ground is going to suit him. He got £1 back for that run. I actually tipped him up in the Great Yorkshire last time. I thought he was quite nicely handicapped off 141. So the same thing has to sort of hold here off a mark of 140. And in a race that TC is quite right, said lacks huge depth, which is disappointing. I think Kandoo Kid is a tentative selection, but not by any stretch a positive selection.
Yeah, you look at this race on the face of it, you think it's going to be a big field competitive handicap. But actually, when it boils down to it, there's just 9 runners, which might suit Kandoo Kid. And really, his form is strong. The second to the now Grade 1 winner, Nickelback, looks good. And JLo is a horse that will go to some of the biggest novice events at Cheltenham. So the form is there. It's just, will he show off that he can keep up to that form? That's what I'm certain with him. So I'm just going to go with a horse, High Skates player, who has showed how much he's enjoying racing at the moment. He's been very wisely campaigned by Tom Lacey, who was represented by Blow Your Wad last week at Kempton for the same connections as well. And similar, both horses on the up, both horses who've been just really enjoying their racing, haven't been overly faced this season. He's just had the 3 runs. They've all been wins. They've come at the likes of Hereford and then last time Kempton. This is a lot tougher, and that's why he's sort of right at the bottom of the ratings here, because it's a big ask for him. And I think that the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is that going left-handed, he's not done a huge amount of it. He seems to prefer going right, but he has seemingly performed okay going around this way as well in the past. I just can't knock his consistency, his ability to go through with his races. Tom Lacey seems to get them into a really good rhythm in terms of their jumping style, and I really like that about this horse. I'm willing to include him in my selections at a bigger price against a horse with too many question marks and doubts in my mind with Kandoo Kid, but TC and Ross will happily take me on. But that's a 9-runner Greatwood Gold Cup, which I think is a bit disappointing considering they've got 100,000 on offer, which isn't too dissimilar in terms of prize money to what they have on offer at Kelso. A really big weekend for this track up in Scotland, and it's always well supported by the biggest trainers from all over the country. And we're going to focus on the Morebattle hurdle. £120,000 they have on offer here. And as it should be, there should be a good field size for this. And there is, again, 18 runners have been declared, which I think is what was in the entry list as well. So that's really pleasing to see. We've got a horse that we've I know one man on this podcast has been following for some time. Under Control in this for Nico de Boinville and Nicky Henderson. We've got Black Hawk Eagle for Richard Patrick, Kerry Lee, Benson, top of the ratings, who's just been in and around here for so many, in this type of field for so many years, Osada and the likes. And I suppose it'd be remiss of us not, and maybe we'll come to you first, Ross, with the news focus around Nicky Henderson. And I know you've gone into detail on your own social platforms via SBK about Constitution Hill, about the lung infection that he has. But I think there's a wider conversation about Nicky Henderson's horses in general. There's slight concern about the way that they've been finishing off their races. It was disappointing to see the likes of Tweed Skirt, who you fancied, pull up so quickly last week. So there's a bit of a concern about the way that they're running with Cheltenham so close.
Yeah, I mean, I put up two of his last weekend, Arclight and Tweed Skirt. And, you know, in hindsight, and I always try to go back over with some sort of due diligence and think, was that a really stupid selection, or, you know, was it just racing? And you could argue that maybe both of them want slightly better ground and Arclight was stepping up against the boys. And I just worry that not only were they beaten, they stopped to nothing and didn't get home. That was alarming. And I must admit, I was unaware of his stable form until after those two runs. And on Saturday night, I looked back through the form, and it's something like 8 of the last 16 have pulled up. 1 has won and 1 has placed. It is dire stuff. And he's always quiet at this time of year. That's a certainty. But there's quiet and then there's running badly. And obviously, Constitution Hill and all that went on with him. I like Under Control. She was one of my 2-mile hurdlers to follow this season. Was bitterly disappointed with her at Newbury, where she tanked through the race, looked like she would win any distance she liked, and stopped very suddenly. Had wind surgery, so maybe that was an issue with her breathing. Came back and ran a really good race at Doncaster, split the Willie Mullins pair, Ashrow, Diamond and Garlamar. So on unfavourable terms, and looked really good. And I think she's better on better ground as well. And it was quite soft and testing there. So it is a bit mad maybe to put up a Nicky Henderson horse given the yard form. But the one thing I did think is she's looking like they want to go here, win this, and then go on to Cheltenham. Cheltenham is definitely on her radar. So I suspect that the ones that are running are going to have had a proper checkup, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if some of these runners this weekend haven't had a scope. So if you're running, you can be maybe a bit more confident that the healthy ones are running and the unhealthy ones are staying at home. I just think she's only gone up £1 for that run. She looks too well handicapped to ignore. So anyone that's following me, understand what you're up against in terms of yard form. But if she runs to the best of her ability, I think it's going to take a really good horse to beat her on these terms.
Yeah, I would say so. She does have the best form in the book, doesn't she? She just is a horse that I think that they've wisely chosen this kind of race. And I think Nicky Henderson has sent some very good horses. Would I be wrong to think the likes of Bouvedere came up here a few years ago? Am I going mad to think that? I think they think that this is a good opportunity in this kind of division when there's several good horses in there who are going the right way, but they probably lack the class that the likes of Under Control is. So a word of warning, as Ross says, with the Nicky Henderson team. But as we know, he's a one man to get them spot on. And he seemed, again, Ross, just quickly, he seemed fairly relaxed, all things considered. And you felt like he was quite measured. There was nothing sort of too irritable about him when it came to this. It felt like sort of we'll crack on and we'll get on, which was the right mentality to give sort of the whole yard with fairly unconfident landscape to be around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Nicky fan, and I try and defend him as his honour as often as I can, and it sometimes makes it difficult coming out with slightly daft sound bites about there being no races or running a 2-mile hurdler in the King's Stand and things like that, But I thought it showed his team at their best. The written statements, the way he clear. I mean, the last place he'd have wanted to be is in front of a camera explaining why his unbeaten superstar, who's had stones thrown at him for not running, has failed to get home in a racecourse gallop. But he was very magnanimous. He explained, I thought, in great detail about what the process was. And it's one of my pet frustrations that the sport doesn't explain in more detail what has to occur for these horses to be healthy. So hopefully this is a positive experience for racing as a whole as we sort of build back up into Cheltenham.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, right. Well, Nicky Henderson does a fair few runners coming up in the next few days. So let's see if Under Control can sort of change the tide a little bit. TC, you've heard all of that. What do you think about this race? And I suppose, what horses there, and it is very much about trainer form at this time of year. They really want to get their horses into the optimum when it's with the spring targets in mind. And there's plenty of these sort of northern based trainers who definitely do with this race in mind.
Yeah, it's a good race, a much better race than the Greatwood Chase that we've already covered. I agree with everything Ross said about the form of Under Control, the fact that she's definitely the best handicapped in the race, the fact that she's probably the best horse in the race. Look, I don't disagree with any of that. What I don't like is the trainer form and then the price. That is the only thing that's putting me off. 11-4, as short as 11-4 in places, that's enough for me to look elsewhere. In a race of this competitive nature, Paul Keeley's already put 3-point win anti-post selection on her as well, so that price is going to tumble. I have no interest in betting 11-4. I think she's a poor value bet, even if she wins, which she may well do, given that Nicky Henderson form. And I am quite key on trainer form, jumps trainer form at this time of year with the ground changing and everything. I think it's quite big. So, look, I'm not interested in Under Control in this race. If she wins, she wins, but I'm happy to bypass her. I put Benson up actually in this race last year when he won at 14-1. And again, I was tempted to put him up this time, hoping for Groundhog Day, but he's £5 higher now. And I didn't like that they ran him in the Scottish Champion Hurdle last time. That veered away from the prep that he had 12 months ago. So he's another horse that I was keen to look into, but again, bypassed him. And instead, I just landed on Black Hawk Eagle. Now, he's a 6-year-old. He's bred to run on the flat, being by Ortad out of a Lemon Drop Kid mare. But he didn't really hit the heights on the level for Noel Mead when previously trained in Ireland. He ran a couple of nice races and actually won on hurdling debut there as well. But since he's moved to Kerry Lee, he's definitely improved. And I love the way he went about his victory last time. He's a very aesthetic horse to watch, which is a weird sentence, but it's very true. Like, he goes through the race and it just looks like he's full of energy. And I like to see that, especially on the flat, but definitely over jumps as well. There's some substance to his form as well. I know he's been winning lesser races than the likes of Under Control's been contesting, Benson's been contesting. But he beat a horse called Georgie Girl on his penultimate start. Georgie Girl has won twice since. He's now £18 higher in the weight. So that form's looking pretty strong. And last time he beat an unexposed horse from a good stable too. So I think Black Hawk Eagle is interesting, lightly raced. And if anything, is the only other horse in this event that looks very obviously well handicapped. And he's a much bigger price than Under Control, with a yard in Kerry Lee, who's currently striking at 75%. So I'd much rather that than Nicky Henderson's 8% or below par, whatever it is right now.
Yeah, the last last 4 runners, she said 3 winners. So you can't really knock that, indeed. And she's not been running a huge amount, but where they have been running, they've been winning. So a lot of confidence then. And with that in mind, sort of contrasting reasons for Black Hawk Eagle, strong form from the stable with Black Hawk Eagle, and that's just a slight concern for the current anti-post favourite Under Control. Okay, my selection is a horse Rewired, who's coming into this again, similar to what you said about your horse Black Hawk Eagle, not really bred to do this, being by power out of a Montjeu mare, but this 6-year-old is clearly strengthening up this season. He's really got himself into a good place. He's coming into the late 120s now in terms of his rating, 127. Luke Scott you won't see him a huge amount, but what weight will you do see of him? I think he rides quite nicely. He seems to get on really well with this horse, and this race has been panned out for him since his very impressive victory at Taunton last time. Again, the form isn't strong, but I can't believe you can undermine anything he's done so far this season. So at around about 12-1, I think he's a good each way value in a race that I couldn't really have a strong selection for any of them. So Rewired with a little bit of I would say confidence in the fact that I agree with Ross that I think Under Control is the best horse in the race, but a slight trepidation with what is happening in the Nicky Henderson yard. So Under Control, just tentative, but let's see how she does. Black Hawk Eagle, and then myself, Rewired. So that is the Morebattle hurdle. As I mentioned, we've got that competition for the Greatwood Chase, so make sure that you've got your selections. You've tweeted SBK, you've commented underneath this podcast, so you can be in with a chance of winning your free £20 bet. Okay, we've got Naps and Next Best coming next. And I think there's a return of an old favourite in here. So I'm going to head to Ross first and get your Nap and Next Best selection.
You make me laugh. So my nap comes in the 4 o'clock at Kelso, and it's the Phil Kirby trained Special Rate, who's been really progressive over fences, winner of 4 of his 5 chase starts, 2 from 3 at Kelso. His last win was a non-event. It was a match race, and his sole rival departed before the race had really hotted up. But prior to that, he beat Jetlegs 3 lengths. Jetlegs, he was giving him £14. Jetlegs won next time quite comfortably, he's up to 120. And I loved how Special Rate went through that race, travelled really powerfully, got to the front, and I'm not sure he did a whole pack in front, and I'm also not sure that he's actually an out-and-out stayer. I think dropping back to this trip is a positive. Better ground, I think, will suit him. He's a really strong travelling horse. His stamina fought further will kick in at the end, and I think Special Rate is the one to be within the 4 o'clock. And then my next best is, drumroll, in the 325. It's my old favourite, Thunder Rock. He's wrong at the weights. You can chuckle away. This horse has got some really good back form. I think they made a right old mess of his sort of running plans last year. They're starting to figure out that he just does not like big field. He ran no race at all in the handicap last time. 7 runners here. The drying ground is going to suit. I know Ollie Murphy is not convinced that he wants 3 miles, but I just fully disagree. He does all his best work at the end of races. Small field should help his jumping. I think Monbeg Genius is a poor favourite. I've been really disappointed by him this year. I loved him last year. I think his jumping has been regressive. I'm not sure he's going to like Kelso as a track. Thunder Rock will. The one concern is, the 0 from 16 in the last, 0 winners in the last 16 days and 0 winners from 16 runners for Ollie Murphy. But they haven't run an awful lot of good horses. A lot of those have been sort of long prices in sort of maidens and novices, perhaps getting the mark. So Thunder Rock, he's got a bit to do, but I think he's a very talented horse. He'll get his ground. He'll like the conditions of this race, and I think he'll upset some more fancied rivals.
Yeah, I don't know how you can forgive him after what happened at Cheltenham.
He hates big fields, Jess.
Oh.
Hates them.
Okay, so seven.
I don't like crowds either.
Yeah, well, I don't. I feel like you can find a lot of excuses for Ollie Murphy horses at the moment. I'm sorry if that is going to upset a few people, but they just can't find an opportunity. I just don't understand what's going wrong. Every time there's a clear opportunity, and there are a lot of them go off short prices as well. Thunder Rock, you probably get a better price for him anyway, but I don't know. It's just not going right. And poor old Sean Bowen's just seeing that gap in the championship just widen and widen. Okay, Thunder Rock, he's back in business on the SBK podcast. If you're with Ross, TC probably had as much enjoyment as I did hearing all of that. Any thoughts? Where have you gone for your nap and next best?
I actually tipped Thunder Rock in that Cheltenham race, so there is no coming back for me with that horse. He's done at the moment. I'll leave you two to bicker about the Premier Chase, though. I know you're going to touch back on that after this, but I'm not a Kelso for my nap or next best. I'm going to Doncaster for the nap, which is Tommy's Oscar in the 235. This event features some reasonably big names. I think Tommy's Oscar is the biggest of them. And albeit his form figures maybe have been a little bit regressive this year, he's not held in the same heights as some of the other horses in the race. I just love the fact he's in this heat. He is a specialist around January and February every year. It sounds ludicrous, but it's true. If you look at his form figures throughout his whole career, and he's a bit of a veteran now, his form figures in Jan and February, 2-1-1, 2-1-4. He's also 2 out of 3 at Doncaster, which included a romp over Boot Hill over fences last season. Boot Hill's a good horse. We've seen him to good effect around Kempton this term and last year. He's just a very solid horse for a trainer in Anne Hamilton who's very good with a small string. I love the cutback to an extended 2 miles with him as well. This marks well within his range. So Tommy's Oscar 235 at Donny is a confident nap. Next best, not as confident. Also, no idea what price we're going to get, which is slightly concerning for putting up a horse because price is always the first thing you should look at. But this is Thursday afternoon, so we haven't got a price for the race. But my next best is a speculative one, and it is Mountain Pass in the 225 at Newbury. Now, Harry Derham's record since going training is ridiculously good. He's striking at 26% with a level stakes profit in his first season training and now his second season training as well, which obviously means an overall level stakes profit. He targets his horses at races they can win. He doesn't rush them. He's just doing everything right. And it's unsurprising given he obviously worked with Paul Nicholls. All of his horses tend to perform well. He very rarely has a horse underperform. Now, he had 3 horses entered in this 225 at Newbury. 2 of them have obviously come out for Dex, and he relies now on Mountain Pass. Mountain Pass form figures read 5-5-5-5. Finished 5th in a bumper first up, and then finished 5th in 3 maiden or novice hurdles. But I actually like all of those runs in the hurdle races. And he just looks very well treated off a mark of 99, for my opinion. He wasn't beaten too far by Jericho de Repine on his penultimate outing here. He moved into the race really well, and it was tender handling late on. The horses who have finished second, third, and fourth in that race are now rated between 113 and 108, suggesting Mountain Pass is well treated off 99. And then last time, he filled the same berth behind another good horse in Lump Sum, who I think is rated 135 and has won a Grade 2 since. The runner-up won next time for Paul Nicholls in good fashion. The fourth has won twice since as well. That's Lady Balco, albeit she's been running off lower marks, but she's been doing it very impressively. The form really stacks up for Mountain Pass. The trainer's exceptionally shrewd. As I say, I don't know what price you're going to get, but on handicap debut, he's very interesting in the 225 at Newbury.
Yeah, okay. I like that, considering there's not a huge amount of depth to it. Couldn't say there's an obvious clear favourite. The likes of Brave Jen and I suppose Florence, the machine for Paul Nicholls, the mare, might be the ones that the market will really, really like. But a very interesting case for Mountain Pass here for Harry Derham on handicap debut. So looking forward to following that in for you, TC. But I'm going to return to this Premier Chase. We'll pick up where we left off, Ross, with our bickering here. Monbeg Genius and Thunder Rock, I say both of them are probably similar in that they will have their doubters and they'll have the punters that won't follow them in again after essentially just not living up to their potential that they could be. But Monbeg Genius, I think, has got a fair more confidence from where I'm sitting than Thunder Rock based on what he's done this year. I think his third behind That's Right Gino all the way back in December now in what used to be the Hennessy is the best piece of form on offer. Yes, he didn't jump great. Sometimes, didn't get into his own rhythm, which he didn't ask either. I like to feel like they've given him plenty of time to work on this. He is a horse that, again, a bit like Thunder Rock, if he makes all and goes out on his own accord, in a smaller field, he might be very difficult to peg back. The only horse that might just really pester him for a lead is the veteran I Right, who you can't knock in terms of what he gets up to in sort of bigger field chases. And he's been a really good servant to the yard for so many years. But Monbeg Genius, fresh young legs, should just be able to keep him up the momentum. So I'd like to see John Joe O'Neill Jr. to really get him to a rhythm out in front and try and make all this time. So I am giving him as my nap selection for what it's worth. I'm slightly nervous this weekend with how punchy I feel against the two men on the pod. But there we go. And then I'm going to go for the 217. It's quite a nice looking novice hurdle, this Grade 2. Django Bay's in here, the Grade 1 winner, but I think he was ultimately disappointing last time. I'm willing to take him on with the mare Brucio for Stuart Crawford. He has such a good record when sending horses over to the UK and Scotland. He's done very well in particular. This mare, the form has worked out very well. She absolutely dotted up when seen in the listed race over the Dublin Racing Festival last time. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see her potentially go into Cheltenham as well. But she's just a mare that is, I think, got a better profile than some of these. I think she's achieved a hell of a lot in a small amount of time, and I'm just willing to take the favourite on Django Bay with her in that race. So she's my next best in the 217 at Kelso. Okay, we'll be watching with intrigue this weekend how our selections, some of them are tentative, some of them have a lot of caution, and some of them I'm not sure we can necessarily trust, but let's see how they get on. Thanks to TC, thanks to Ross. We will be recording our Cheltenham preview special next week. I know there are a lot of them, but ours, as always, is concise, it's to the point, and hopefully it will be full of winners. So we're looking forward to recording that next week. Don't forget, all new SBK users get £30 in free bets when you sign up and bet £10 for the first time. Head to SBK for lots of other offers and promotions throughout this weekend. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.